You may have noticed two sets of tools here in our interface. And it's important to know which ones are the drawing tools before you actually really get involved in Toom Studio, because some of the tools do look the same. So what we have to do is go to the Tools menu up here, and you'll see that we have drawing tools as well as scene planning tools. And if you ever forget, just look at the icons and see which ones belong to which palette here or panel. So I'm going to temporarily get rid of this guy right now. We don't need the scene planning ones because we're going to focus on the drawing tools. And once again, you can see what those tools are and their names by simply going up to this menu. And these drawing tools are actually mirrored in this panel here. So what do we have? We have, first of all, we have our select tool. And the select tool lets you select objects so you can move them around or scale them or whatever you need to do. We have our contour editor. And what you do with this tool is pretty much reshape a stroke that you draw with the brush, for example. You also have a perspective tool here, and this tool will allow you to take artwork and change the perspective. Now, I'm actually going to draw a piece of artwork here just so we can see what happens. And drawing in all white is not exactly a great idea. So let me grab my properties here and go to my colors and choose a color that we can actually see when I draw. And I'll choose to draw something like a filled ellipse. And I'll give this guy a color, and I'm going to group this together. So now we can actually see what the tools do. Okay. So once again, here's the select tool. I can move things around, and I can scale them, and I can rotate with this tool, and I can do all kinds of stuff with that as long as it's selected with the select tool. I can also use the contour editor to select any of the lines here to change the contour of the object. You see that? How cool is that? Likewise, I can use the perspective tool. Now, this is a cool tool. What I'm going to do with this tool is I'm going to draw out a boundary or a marquee around the object, and the handles now will let me change the perspective of the artwork contained within. And I can create a teardrop or Hershey's Kiss or whatever I want to using the perspective tool. It's a very, very, very cool tool. I also have the reposition all drawings option. And this is handy when you import artwork or you happen to draw your artwork a little bit off center and you need to center everything. So it's a really good tool. We also have our other tools here. We have our brush tool, which of course is used to create artwork, as well as the pencil tool, the rectangle tool, the ellipse tool as I just demonstrated, the polyline tool, which is kind of like drawing your own points and you click and drag to create shapes. And as long as you click on the very first point you started to draw with, you close that shape. Also, you can use this tool to click and to drag, like so, to create curves. So I'm just creating a gigantic mess, but I just want to show you what that tool does. If you're familiar with Flash or Illustrator or Photoshop and you've ever used the pen tool, it works in the same way. And I still have a point there, but I'll leave that alone. We also have our line tool, and we can use this to draw straight lines. Every time I hold down the Shift key, it constrains it and allows me to draw in angles of 15 degrees. Very cool. I also have the ability to use the paint tool to fill in my shapes with colors. So I can go back to my properties and I can choose a color swatch here, choose the paint tool, click in a shape and give it a fill. I can also change the stroke or the outline here. So all I do is choose a color and click on the outline or the fill to change the color of that object. Let's go ahead and give that a color like so. And we also have the ability to unpaint things. I can click in the shape and I just took out that color. So I can put another color in if I so desire. Let me go ahead and just put some other color in there. We also have the dropper tool. The dropper tool allows you to select a color. For example, I'll use the dropper tool to select this blue. And then what I could do with that color is I can use it to then take the paint tool to select another object and then emulate that color. I also have the close gap tool, which I'm going to talk about in another lesson, which is kind of cool. If you have a shape that has, a line that's not connected, you can use that tool to give that shape a color or a fill. We also have a stroke tool and an edit texture tool, which I'll talk about in upcoming lessons as well. Edit texture is very cool, so you can create a gradient, for example, and use this tool to move that gradient around and rotate that gradient within a shape. We also have our eraser tool, cutter tool, and scissor tool. Of course, the eraser tool allows you to erase line art, and these tools allow you to cut your artwork up into different chunks, and I do cover these tools in a separate lesson. We have our magnifying glass tool, which is called the zoom here, and our grabber tool. So if I click with the zoom tool and I click in my screen, I'm able to magnify what I'm looking at. If I hold down the Option or Alt key, the plus sign inside the middle of this magnifying glass turns into a negative sign or a minus sign, so I can click and zoom out. Likewise, I can simply press Z on the keyboard to zoom out. And I also have the grabber tool. This tool is similar to holding down the space bar on your keyboard to move around your work area. For example, I'll go ahead and just hold the space bar down and I can move around. So I'll go ahead and choose another tool and I'll show you that I can still use this grabber tool. So I'll go to my zoom tool, but I'll hold the space bar down and look, I get the grabber tool. So you really don't ever have to manually select the grabber tool. Just whatever tool you're in, doesn't really matter, any tool at all, hold the space bar down and you can move around in your workspace. Very cool and very handy. And we also have our text tool, which allows us to click and create text. So these are the drawing tools that you'll become very, very familiar with as you learn and use Toom Studio to create your animations and your artwork.